There are moments in professional wrestling that transcend the scripted nature of the business, moments so raw and visceral that they blur the boundary between performance and reality. What unfolded on WWE television recently was precisely one of those moments, a shocking display of unbridled aggression that left the entire wrestling world reeling in disbelief. When Bron Breakker, one of WWE's most promising young stars, crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed, attacking SmackDown general manager Nick Aldis in a brutal assault that sent shockwaves through the industry, the landscape of WWE changed forever. The aftermath has been swift and severe, with WWE announcing an indefinite suspension that has thrown Breakker's promising career into absolute jeopardy. The tension had been building for weeks, simmering beneath the surface like a volcano preparing to erupt. Bron Breakker, the second-generation superstar carrying the legendary Steiner name, had been on an absolute tear through the WWE roster. His combination of raw power, explosive athleticism, and that signature intensity inherited from his family lineage made him one of the most dangerous competitors on any roster. But with that intensity came something darker, something more difficult to control. Week after week, Breakker's matches grew more aggressive, his demeanor more hostile, his interactions with authority more confrontational. Nick Aldis, serving as the general manager of Friday Night SmackDown, had been doing his best to manage the situation with the professionalism and composure that has defined his career. The former NWA World Heavyweight Champion brought legitimacy and gravitas to the role, handling disputes and controversies with an even hand and measured approach. But managing someone like Bron Breakker, someone with that much raw intensity and that burning need to dominate, would test anyone's patience and diplomatic skills. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine segment. SmackDown was moving along as scheduled, the crowd energized and engaged with the evening's action. Nick Aldis stood in the ring, microphone in hand, prepared to address some administrative matter or announce some upcoming match. The arena lights gleamed off his impeccably tailored suit, his posture confident and authoritative. He commanded the ring with the presence of someone who had been a world champion, someone who understood the wrestling business from every angle. But before Aldis could get more than a few sentences into his announcement, Bron Breakker's music hit. The aggressive, hard-hitting theme blared through the arena's sound system, immediately changing the atmosphere in the building. This wasn't a scheduled appearance. This wasn't part of the announced program. The crowd's reaction was a mixture of excitement and uncertainty, cheers mixed with murmurs of confusion about what was happening. Breakker emerged from the backstage area with a purpose that was immediately apparent to anyone watching. This wasn't the typical entrance of a wrestler coming out for a promo or to stake a claim in some ongoing storyline. The look on his face was different, harder, more focused in a way that suggested something beyond the usual scripted confrontation. His jaw was set, his eyes locked on the ring where Aldis stood, and every muscle in his powerful frame seemed coiled and ready to explode into action. Nick Aldis recognized the danger immediately. You could see it in the subtle shift of his body language, the way his expression changed from mild surprise to something approaching genuine concern. He maintained his composure, as any good authority figure should, but there was a wariness in his eyes as Breakker stalked down the entrance ramp. Aldis began speaking, attempting to address whatever issue had brought Breakker out here, trying to defuse the situation before it could escalate into something neither of them could control. But Bron Breakker wasn't there to talk. He had moved beyond words, beyond the typical back and forth of wrestling promos and authority figure confrontations. Whatever had been building inside him, whatever frustrations and anger had been accumulating week after week, had reached a critical mass. He climbed into the ring with predatory focus, his eyes never leaving Aldis, his body language making his intentions abundantly clear to everyone watching. Aldis attempted to maintain control of the situation, speaking in measured tones, trying to use his authority as general manager to command Breakker to stand down. He reminded Breakker of the consequences of laying hands on WWE management, of the penalties that would follow any physical altercation. His words were professional, Firm but not inflammatory, exactly what you would expect from someone in his position trying to prevent a catastrophic mistake. None of it mattered. Bron Breakker closed the distance between them in 2 quick strides, and before Aldis could react, before security could intervene, before anyone could stop what was about to happen, Breakker struck. The first blow caught Aldis completely off guard, a devastating punch that connected with sickening force. The general manager's head snapped back from the impact, his microphone flying from his hand and skittering across the canvas as his body staggered backward. The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral. Gasps and screams filled the arena as fans processed what they were witnessing. This wasn't a typical wrestling angle where heels attack authority figures in carefully choreographed segments. This felt different, more real, more dangerous. The way Aldis fell, the genuine shock on his face, the uncontrolled nature of Breakker's aggression, everything about the moment screamed that something had gone terribly wrong. But Breakker didn't stop. As Aldis tried to regain his footing, tried to create some distance and protect himself, Breakker advanced again. Another brutal strike landed, then another, each one delivered with the full force of Breakker's considerable strength. Aldis, not dressed for physical confrontation and certainly not prepared for this level of violence, could offer no real defense. He raised his arms to try to protect his face, backing into the corner of the ring as Breakker continued the relentless assault. The corner offered no sanctuary. Breakker trapped Aldis there, delivering a series of devastating shoulder tackles to the midsection that drove all the air from the general manager's lungs. Each impact echoed through the arena, the sound of Breakker's powerful shoulder driving into Aldis's body, creating a sickening rhythm that had the crowd alternating between shock and calls for someone to stop this attack. Officials and referees flooded toward the ring from backstage, their striped shirts visible as they rushed down the entrance ramp. But they hesitated at ringside, uncertain about how to intervene against someone as physically imposing and clearly out of control as Bron Breakker. Security personnel followed behind them, but even they seemed to pause, calculating the risk of stepping between an enraged athlete and his target. That hesitation proved costly. With Aldis slumped in the corner, barely conscious from the repeated impacts, Breakker grabbed him and hauled him to the center of the ring. The general manager's legs barely supported his weight, his body sagging as Breakker positioned him. The crowd knew what was coming next, could see Breakker setting up for his finishing maneuver, and the anticipation created a strange, uncomfortable tension in the arena. Breakker lifted Aldis with frightening ease, demonstrating the raw power that has made him such a dominant force in WWE. He hoisted the general manager onto his shoulders in a gorilla press position, holding him high above the ring for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. Then, with explosive force, he transitioned into his devastating spear, the move he calls the Spear from Hell, driving Aldis into the canvas with catastrophic impact. The sound of the impact was genuinely disturbing. Aldis's body folded from the force of the spear, his frame bouncing slightly before settling completely motionless on the mat. The crowd's reaction was a mixture of awe at the athletic display and horror at the violence inflicted on someone who wasn't an active competitor. Breakker immediately popped back to his feet, standing over Aldis's prone form, his chest heaving with exertion and continued rage. Now the officials and security finally rushed the ring, swarming in from all sides in an attempt to separate Breakker from his victim and prevent any further violence. But Breakker wasn't finished. He shoved aside the first wave of officials who tried to restrain him, his superior strength and intensity making their attempts to control him look futile. He reached down and grabbed Aldis again, ignoring the hands pulling at his arms and shoulders, determined to inflict more punishment. What happened next will be replayed and analyzed for years to come. Breakker lifted the barely conscious Aldis once more, this time transitioning him into position for his family's legendary finishing move, the Steiner Recliner. The submission hold has ended countless matches throughout wrestling history, applied by his uncle Scott Steiner and other members of the Steiner family. But applying it here, to a non-wrestler who had no training in how to take the move safely, crossed every line of professional conduct in WWE. The sight of Breakker wrenching back on the hold, Aldis's face contorted in agony, his body trapped with nowhere to go, was genuinely difficult to watch. The officials were screaming at Breakker to release the hold, security was desperately trying to break his grip, and the crowd had gone from shocked excitement to genuine concern for Aldis's well-being. This had stopped being entertainment and become something darker, something that felt like a legitimate assault happening in front of thousands of witnesses. Finally, through sheer numbers and persistence, the officials and security personnel managed to break Breakker's grip on the hold. It took at least 8 people to physically separate him from Aldis, and even then, Breakker fought against their restraint, trying to break free and continue his assault. His face was a mask of pure rage, all traces of the charismatic performer gone, replaced by something primal and frightening. As Breakker was forcibly removed from the ring, surrounded by security and being pulled toward the backstage area, medical personnel rushed to attend to Nick Aldis. The general manager lay motionless in the center of the ring, his suit disheveled and torn, visible signs of injury already appearing on his face and body. The concern on the medical staff's faces was evident as they carefully examined him, calling for additional assistance and stabilization equipment. The broadcast went to commercial break, but the damage was done. Social media had already exploded with clips and reactions to what had transpired. Fans, wrestlers, journalists, and casual observers were all weighing in on the shocking assault they had just witnessed. The consensus was universal. Bron Breakker had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and there would be severe consequences for his actions. When the show returned from commercial, the atmosphere had completely changed. The energy in the arena had shifted from the usual excitement and entertainment to something more somber and uncertain. Commentators were speaking in hushed, serious tones, updating viewers on Nick Aldis's condition and confirming that he was being transported to a local medical facility for evaluation. The remainder of the show felt like an afterthought, everything existing in the shadow of the brutal attack that had occurred. Backstage interviews with other wrestlers revealed a roster in shock. Superstars who had worked with Breakker expressed disbelief at what they had witnessed. Some defended him, suggesting that something must have pushed him to that breaking point. Others condemned the attack outright, calling it inexcusable and demanding that WWE take swift and severe action. The locker room appeared divided, processing the incident in real time just like the viewing audience. WWE's response came faster than anyone expected. Within hours of the show going off the air, an official statement was released through WWE's corporate communications channels. The statement was brief, professional, and devastating for Bron Breakker's career. It read that following the unprovoked attack on SmackDown general manager Nick Aldis, WWE had decided to suspend Bron Breakker indefinitely, effective immediately. The suspension would remain in place pending a full investigation into the incident and determination of appropriate long-term consequences. The use of the word indefinite was particularly significant. This wasn't a 30-day suspension or a 60-day suspension with a clear return date that would allow storylines to be built around his comeback. Indefinite meant there was no timeline, no guarantee that Breakker would ever be welcomed back to WWE programming. It suggested that the company was treating this with the utmost seriousness, that real consequences would follow this attack regardless of Breakker's status as a rising star. The wrestling media went into overdrive analyzing every aspect of the situation. Journalists with sources inside WWE reported that there were genuine concerns within the company about the optics of the attack, particularly given the current climate around violence and workplace safety. Others reported that some WWE executives were furious about the incident, feeling that Breakker had put the company in an impossible position and damaged WWE's reputation. Fan reactions were predictably mixed and passionate. Some hardcore wrestling fans appreciated the intensity and commitment to the storyline, arguing that this kind of unpredictable violence is what makes wrestling compelling. They praised Breakker for his intensity and commitment to his character, suggesting that the suspension was an overreaction to good old-fashioned storytelling. These fans pointed to historical examples of wrestlers attacking authority figures and questioned why this incident was being treated differently. On the other side were fans who felt the attack had gone too far, that targeting a non-wrestler in such a brutal manner crossed ethical boundaries. They expressed concern about normalizing violence against non-combatants and questioned whether such content was appropriate for WWE's diverse audience that includes children and families. Some called for Breakker to be released from his contract entirely, arguing that there should be real consequences for such actions even in a scripted environment. The debate extended beyond just fans to industry insiders and veteran wrestlers. Retired legends weighed in on social media and podcasts, offering their perspectives on the incident. Some old-school wrestlers praised Breakker's intensity and suggested that modern wrestling had become too soft and scripted. Others, particularly those who had witnessed careers ended by reckless behavior, cautioned that there are lines that shouldn't be crossed even in pursuit of compelling television. Nick Aldis's condition became a major focal point in the days following the attack. WWE provided periodic updates through their official channels, reporting that Aldis had sustained injuries including a concussion, bruised ribs, and various contusions. The updates were carefully worded, maintaining the kayfabe of the situation while also acknowledging real medical concerns. Aldis himself remained silent on social media and in public statements, allowing WWE to control the narrative around his condition. As Friday's SmackDown approached, anticipation built around how WWE would address the situation on television. Would they acknowledge the suspension directly? Would they write Aldis off television to allow the real injuries time to heal? Would other wrestlers address what had happened? The uncertainty created genuine interest in the show, with viewership expected to spike as fans tuned in to see the fallout. The broadcast opened not with the usual pyrotechnics and excitement, but with a somber tone. A video package recapped the attack from the previous week, showing multiple angles of Breakker's assault on Aldis. The footage was presented in a serious, documentary style rather than the usual highlight reel treatment, emphasizing the severity of the incident. Commentary throughout the package stressed that this was not acceptable behavior and that WWE took such matters seriously. Following the video package, a WWE official appeared on screen to formally announce Breakker's indefinite suspension. The official read from a prepared statement outlining the company's zero-tolerance policy for attacks on WWE personnel and management. The statement emphasized that while WWE programming features athletic competition and storyline conflicts, there are boundaries that cannot be crossed, and Breakker's actions had violated those boundaries. The official also provided an update on Nick Aldis, confirming that he was recovering from his injuries, but would be taking time away from his general manager duties to fully recuperate. A temporary replacement would be named to handle SmackDown's administrative duties until Aldis was medically cleared to return. The announcement was delivered with appropriate gravity, treating the situation as a serious workplace incident rather than typical wrestling storyline fodder. Throughout the show, various wrestlers were interviewed about their reactions to Breakker's suspension. Some expressed satisfaction that justice had been served and that WWE had taken appropriate action. Others suggested that while Breakker's actions were wrong, the indefinite nature of the suspension might be excessive for a first-time offense. The diversity of opinions kept the conversation alive and allowed for nuanced discussion of the incident. But the most impactful moment came near the end of the broadcast when Nick Aldis appeared via pre-recorded video message. Looking genuinely battered, with visible bruising on his face and moving with obvious discomfort, Aldis addressed the WWE Universe directly. His voice was measured but carried an edge of real emotion as he recounted the attack and its aftermath. He spoke about the physical pain he was experiencing, the shock of being attacked so brutally, and his disappointment that a talented performer like Breakker had chosen this path. However, Aldis's message didn't end with condemnation. In a twist that surprised many viewers, he acknowledged that Breakker was a tremendously gifted athlete with a bright future ahead of him. He expressed hope that this suspension would serve as a wake-up call, that Breakker would use this time to reflect on his actions and come back as a better competitor and person. It was a classy response that elevated Aldis's character while also leaving the door open for Breaker's eventual return to the company. The social media response to Aldis's statement was overwhelmingly positive. Fans praised his professionalism